All right, it's my pleasure to welcome on a man who represented Australia in both the Commonwealth and Olympic Games for diving, Grant Nell. Grant, how are you today, mate?
Great, Chris. Thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Mate, the pleasure is all mine. I guess first things first, you were born in Johannesburg, South Africa, I believe. Talk
Yes.
about growing up there and how you come to find yourself in Australia.
Yeah, sure, Chris. As you mentioned, I was born in South Africa. All of my family's from there. Growing up was pretty cool. I was very involved as a gymnast when I was really younger. So pretty much school and gym was all I did. Training at a very high level in gymnastics, and yeah, I went to fortunate enough to go to a nice school in South Africa, St. Stithians College, and then when we emigrated over to Australia in 2001, or end of this 2001, moved over to the suburbs, the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, I was 12 when we moved over.
Yep.
And it was awesome to move to Australia. A lot different. School was a lot different. I'd come from an all boys school, and went into my first co-ed school, so that was a bit challenging, a bit different, and a bit awesome. It was good. But the parts of South Africa was, for me, it was just everyday life was normal for me. I didn't really know any different. All of my friends are still back there, and a lot of my family. But yeah, as I said, because I was so busy with school and training, that I just lived my life as a naughty little kid, got in trouble all the time, as a lot of kids do, and played my cricket at school, played soccer, played rugby, and then fell into diving one day. Excuse the pun, but it was just how it went, I guess.
Don't worry, mate. I've got heaps of diving puns scheduled, so that won't even be the worst one.
Yeah.
Co-ed schools are a bit of a zoo, aren't they?
Yeah, and also I guess it was a bit different, sort of moving to Australia and experiencing the tall poppy syndrome, or just the fact that I'd come from a different country, but in saying that, the opportunities that Australia has given me, I don't even have a South African passport anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I call myself an Aussie, and I would never have been able to do so well in life and sport without the support of the Aussie way.
Yeah, it is very funny when I try and talk to people who are not from Australia about that sort of tall poppy syndrome. I know a lot of people who are Canadian or from New Zealand, and it's very, very different with their athletes and the way people view their athletes. And for a large part, a lot of Australian athletes don't really like to talk about themselves as much, or even, I don't want to say acknowledge what they've achieved, but from a large part, they sort of play it down as a result of sort of, just the way we are. It's crazy. Is it completely
exactly
opposite in South Africa?
To be honest, I wouldn't really remember that much. I was on this junior South African gymnastics team, and then when I was about 9 or 10, I broke both my hands in a bad gymnastics accident, and I couldn't do high bar or rings or anything anymore. And at the time, my school started a diving program, and the coach happened to be one of the South African coaches, and so she picked me up straight away and said, "Well, you've got to move into diving." And I was, sort of tossing and turning about whether I should or shouldn't do it. Anyway, after a little bit of time, I ended up quitting gym and keep doing diving, and I won South African nationals that first year, which was amazing.
That
made the South African
helped
team,
you fall in love with the sport.
Exactly. But then we moved over to Australia the following year, and there's a lot more divers in Australia than South Africa. So, and all the different states that do it and stuff. So it was a bit of a wake up call for me as well. But in saying that, as soon as I moved over, I did pretty well as well. Even got my citizenship a bit early because Australia wanted me to compete for them. And
that's the one thing Australia's good at.
Exactly.
The Australian government's very good at that.
Yeah. I got my Aussie citizenship in 2002, and my first international was for Australia at the end of 2002 in Canada. So basically, from then on, I represented Australia till I retired in 2018. So
what was it about diving? I know you probably weren't thinking about it while you were doing gymnastics, but once you sort of got stuck into it, you
Yeah.
obviously don't go through and have a career of your length without, having some kind of passion about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Chris. Probably partly because of the perfectionist of it. How every dive's got to score that 10. Or the shittest thing about diving is you work your ass off to get told how shit you are, right? Because you're getting judged by other people. So
Yeah.
It's not about winning a race and being the quickest. It's literally other people's perspective on how you dove, which gives you the score. So I've got a big love and hate relationship with the sport, because maybe to me I did a good dive, but someone else didn't perceive that, therefore you don't get the score you thought you wanted. But yeah, I think just because I picked it up really easily from the gymnastics background, having that aerial awareness, being able to do flips already, and just I don't know, it's a very unique sport to do. A lot of people don't do it, but everyone loves to watch it. And in saying that, I was a very good cricket player as well. I wish I could have pursued that, but now I do it after, now I play in Torquay, and that's good enough for me. So
a lot of the time I had a former hurdler who is about to go to the Beijing Olympics in bobsled. And I think a lot of the time what you do see with athletes is it doesn't really matter what it is. They have that competitive drive that it's almost like all right, well, I can't do this, which is what I want, but just the way they're wired, they're just going to attack, the next thing, because that pursuit of like competition and, that drive is just unmatchable. And, that doesn't matter what the sport is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, it folds into everyday life for us after sport or that sort of thing. I mean, it's been tough since I retired, trying to find something that I wanted to do. So I've been retired since almost 4 years now. And it was very hard. Like mentally, it was tough. Like it sucked. And also missing out on teams. The 2012 Olympics, I missed out and then had to get shoulder surgery on, and then I wanted to quit the sport, and it was a really low point in my life. And lucky that I had some people around me to support me. At the time, I was living in Texas because I was at college over there at Texas A&M, and yeah, it sucked. But somehow my coach and friends and family got me back on board, and got me to really realize that I still had something to give to the sport, and wanted to give and wanted to get out of it. And yeah, it came back after the shoulder surgery, and had to work another 4 years to make the Rio Olympics. And those 4 years were the best years of my diving. I actually realized that I was doing it for me because I loved the sport. I wasn't doing it to prove anyone else wrong, or to, just because I had to or anything. I actually realized that I do this because I love it. I just love the sport. So.
Yeah. Do you find with other sort of professional athletes that that there is a lot of that, either doing it to prove people wrong or to silence doubters or for whatever, and don't actually do it, as you say, for yourself and for the love of the sport, and it can kind of, sidetrack them in some cases?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it can sidetrack them in some cases, but it can also give you motivation in some cases. For me, it definitely gave me motivation. I had times where you sort of overheard parents talking about, Grant's not a good diver, he'll never get anywhere, or I'm dyslexic, and I was told when I was young I'd probably never be smart or get a degree or anything like that. And you just personally, my take on that was, well, fine, I'll prove you wrong. This is what I can do. This is who I am. I've got my degrees now. I can fly an aeroplane. I'm now becoming a firefighter. It's, people say things and it's like, well, fine, I can prove you wrong. So yeah, it's tough sometimes, and sometimes it can get the better of you, or you might be doing things for the wrong reason. But overall, I think my career was definitely, the longevity of it was because I loved it so much.
Yeah, no, that's great. I don't want to sort of not get into sort of what you touched on there about retirement and the fact that you struggled. A lot of athletes do sort of talk about that they have not two deaths but that when your career ends, it does feel like, the largest part of you is essentially gone. And a lot of them do sort of struggle in that. And it takes them a while to sort of reclaim or find a new identity. And talk about what that's like, because for someone like me, I've worked in an office most of my life. I've wanted to be a professional athlete for as long as I could imagine, but I'm shit at everything I do. So I will never experience, what say you or what other professional athletes go through. Talk about that and sort of, just how difficult it can be.
So Chris, when you fly internationally and you come back, you got to fill out a departure card or incoming passenger card, and on that passenger card you've got to put your occupation. And for 20 years I put athlete, right? And one day I fly back into Australia and I have to fill out the passenger card, and suddenly I can't put athlete anymore. And I was just like, who am I? Like, I have this distinct memory flying back in, and I was like, that's all I've ever known myself as, that I'm not anymore, So I think that when you said before how you have the two deaths and not having that identity anymore is literally like losing someone or losing something in your, a whole part of yourself. And I can see how athletes can turn to other things, other substances or substance abuse, or get depressed and that sort of thing, because I went through it. I mean, I was depressed about it big time. I had to end up, didn't want anyone's help. I didn't know what was going on. And I was going to go see a psychologist, and I just was moody and angry and just lost. And finally I bit the bullet, so to speak, and I went and saw a psych, and it was the best day of my life, because I just went in there, spoke to this person who had no idea who I was, and basically bawled my eyes out about things. And they're just like, well, all you need to do is find something that you are passionate about again. And athletes, the mental health side of things, for people and athletes, and it's massive. It's huge, and it's very important to keep check on your mental health. I mean, it's as important as your everyday things that you do to live. And for me, it was a big wake up call to realize I needed help. I'm very good at putting on a brave face, especially because I guess being a diver and you're getting judged all the time. It's easy to say, hey, I'm all good, I'm grand, I'm smiling, I'm always up and about. But deep down, I wasn't after retiring, and it took a long time, a few years to get over that. And finally getting into the Fireys, it took me 5 goes to get in, and I found a new passion. I found out I've got an amazing partner, a beautiful daughter, and life now is good. I was a diver, always will be an Olympian, but it was a past life, and things move on, and people move on. So
yeah, no, that's absolutely an amazing answer, and not to put a funny light on it, but I have actually written athlete on one of those cards before. So I mean, I'm definitely not, but sometimes it's nice to imagine. It's a lot better than writing analyst down on there. So it made me feel good when I did that. But
perfect. I couldn't believe it when we arrived at one time, and I was just like, I started writing it out, and I'm like, oh, I'm not that anymore. It's like, it really got me, that one. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you're holding up the line, and there's like 30 people behind you. You've just got the pen, and you've just completely frozen.
And you know how angry people are coming back in through customs.
Yeah, no, it's probably the most miserable place in the world. So let's get into Texas A&M. I'm a very big college football enthusiast, so I'm well aware of Texas A&M and the Aggies and how crazy that school is. Talk about, what that behind that decision and going there. And was that ultimately something that sort of was a really big growth period for you competitively?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Chris, it was probably the best 4 years of my young adult life, I'd say. Back then, I was at World Championships in Melbourne in 2007. We hosted the FINA World Championships here, and I got approached by the University of Tennessee asking if I'd be interested in flying over to the University of Tennessee for a recruit trip. Anyway, so once I thought, well, I never really thought about that. Yeah, I mean, I'll go for a trip. Why not? But then as soon as you get put in the database, other schools can then see, oh, we'll bring you over as well. And basically how a recruiting trip works is they fly you over, they pay for all the expenses. You're only allowed to spend 48 hours on campus. And then you've got to leave. It's just part of the NCAA rules and all their regulations that they have. So by the time I was about to leave to go to Tennessee, Texas A&M, University of Miami, and University of Hawaii had also asked if I was interested in looking at their unis. Anyway, so my first stop was actually A&M, which wasn't even high on my radar. And College Station is a very small country redneck town that is home of Texas A&M, and it's got its own little airport. So I flew into this airport on a small little commercial plane, and you basically fly over the whole university, and it's like literally flying into a college town. So the whole universities, there's buildings everywhere, there's football stadiums, there's track stadiums, there's basketball arenas, baseball arenas. I mean, it's like an Olympic village or an Olympic venue, so to speak, in terms of having all those amazing sporting facilities right there and then. And I don't know, I instantly fell in love with it. You've got people walking around in their cowboy boots and jeans and cowboy hats and saying, "G'day, y'all. Hey, how y'all doing?"
It's a different world.
Yeah, it was absolutely different world and an amazing experience. So I spent 48 hours there, and they offered me a full ride anyway. So then the next was Tennessee, and got to Tennessee, and they showed me around. Also amazing facilities. Now I'm and all they're trying to do in your 48 hours is one and dine you, basically. You go to parties, you get shown around the school, you go to more parties, and then you fly out to the next place. So it was a massive week of just getting onto it. But so that's basically how it went. But then I went to Tennessee, and Dave Parrington he's the coach. There was actually he's a South African, and he was probably the reason why I was going to potentially go there, was because he knew a few people that I did. But then they only offered me a 75% scholarship, and I was like, well, A&M's offered me a full one. I'm going to make you guys regret this.
I got 4 more visits lined up this week.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a hot commodity.
Yeah, exactly. So by the end of it, I had actually in the back of my mind already chose A&M as soon as I got there, just because it was an amazing place. The people were awesome, and I instantly felt at home. Helps that I like the color maroon as well. So becoming an Aggie was a hell of a lot of fun, and there's actually A&M played this morning in a football game that I watched for a bit, which was great. I'm a diehard Aggie fan and love the sport, love the school, and can't wait to go back. So.
Yeah, for those who don't know what a sort of college town like is, because there are so many colleges in America that are sort of like the way you explained. It's in this little small town in the middle of nowhere, and then all of a sudden over the horizon you see this stadium which seats 80,000 people, and the facilities are just absolutely nuts. But I at one point in time was trying to play college football, and so I've friends who went to Texas, Hawaii, USC, all these sort of stadiums, and I ultimately didn't go anywhere. I had a bad knee injury, gave it away, but I was probably not heading to any of those schools anyway. But watching them play in front of these, it's absolutely madness. Like you have 80,000 people screaming your name, and you're like, I had a guy named Dane Roy on who went to Houston, and he basically won the scholarship. He won a coaching thing through kicking a torp at an AFL grand final, and then eventually made his way to Houston. And it's like, a year ago he was playing local footy, and now he's in front of 60,000 people, like kicking a torp. And you sort of just have to like pinch yourself and go like, what the fuck did I just get myself into?
Exactly. And the traditions and the midnight yell. So at Caulfield, they've just upgraded it now, and I think it holds 115,000 for college sport. Like, it's crazy. And every night before a football game, they have what's called midnight yell, which is the whole of this, all the students basically go to the college at 11:45 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
and they practice all of their war cries or their school song and stuff like that for the next day. So the whole Aggie band is there, and so you practice it, and then at 11:59 all the lights go out, and if you're single you hold up a lighter and you try and find someone else who's got a lighter, and you're meant to try and hook up with them or kiss them. And so just like crazy traditions like that, or because it's a big military school as well, there's certain parts where students aren't even allowed on the grass because it's like tradition to not walk on those certain places, and you'll get yelled at by people if you walk on the grass in certain areas.
That's madness. What did you study? Explain. I mean, I know we're sort of talking about the glamorous side of it, but being a student athlete is sort of not a complete fairy tale. It's obviously very hard with the schedule and that. So what did you study, and sort of talk about what a normal week would look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So as you said, you're a student athlete. So you're a student before an athlete. So you actually have to be passing all your classes to be eligible to compete. And that's an NCAA rule. In saying that, you have all of the facilities and personnel at your disposal if you are falling behind in a class. So we had mandatory study hours every day that we had to do. We had to do all the same amount of classwork as all the other regular students. So we would have training in the morning, normally from 7 till 9, and then you go to class, and then you go for lunch, and then you go to class, and then you have training at about 3:45 till about 5 or 6. And then you'd basically go to study hall, study for 2 hours, and then go to bed. And then if you were competing, well, then you'd have to, like, that was Monday to Friday. And then Saturdays we'd have training as well. And then we'd have Sunday off. But then you'd also, if you were, say you're competing or you're flying to a different competition every weekend, then Fridays you were never at school. So you had to make sure you spent extra time at study hall or, that sort of thing, catching up on your classes, because you still had to be passing. You had to, it was a lot of hard work and very tough for me. But I ended up studying ag development and agricultural engineering, which was a lot of fun. Came out with that piece of paper at the end, and a hell of a lot of good college stories, just like the movies.
Yeah, I'm sure some of them that we probably can't get into, but that's fine. As we sort of mentioned at the top, you represent Australia in the Commonwealth Games and in the Olympics as well. Let's touch on the Olympic side first. You mentioned before that you missed out on sort of 2 previous games before you represented Australia at Rio in 2016.
Yeah.
What was it like to make that team, sort of going through the shoulder surgery and then missing the team the other year, and just sort of, a lot of times athletes, it's 4 years of preparation, but you've basically gone a decade or more than a decade.
Yeah. Look, the experiences itself it's almost surreal still to me. Walking out in my Australian tracksuit, getting presented before the prelims in front of everyone. You walk out in sort of the order you're going to dive in. Seeing my whole family in the crowd, they all came over to watch me, which was amazing. So my mum, my dad, my brother, my partner, and her mum were there at the time as well. My sister didn't come because of they had some mosquito virus that they were worried
Zika?
about. She was pregnant. Yeah, Zika, and she was pregnant, so she didn't want to risk it. And anyway, they had a cutout of her face there as well. And I just remember like walking between the 2 pools and looking up at my family and just being like, holy crap, we've finally done it. And my personal perspective on being an Olympian is you're not one until you've actually competed. You're not one until the whistle's gone and the event started, or, you've done your first, event or whatever. And I remember doing my first dive. In diving, you've got to do 6 dives in a competition. And I remember doing my first dive. It was a front 3.5 somersault pike and hitting the water. And I just thought to myself, underwater, I've done it. I'm an Olympian now. It just was a big relief. All the hard work had paid off. All the dedication, the tears, the surgeries, the time that I'd spent in hospital or with back issues, and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't just for me, my family as well. We'd finally done it. So that experience was amazing. I missed out on so many other teams throughout my career. I was fortunate enough to go to 6 World Championships and 6 World Cups. And, getting to do that, travel the world, do like 30 countries a year for the last 10 years. And it all came down to doing a front 3.5 pike in Rio at the end. It's to this day, it gives me chills, thinking about it, talking about it. I can still feel the dive, how it felt for me, how I hit the water, looking up at my coach and him, telling me what I did wrong. The whole experience, the people, the village, was everything I ever dreamed and more. It was just so cool to be there representing the country that's done so much for me. Because I probably could have competed for South Africa in 2008 at the Olympics, but it was not something I wanted to do because I wanted to compete for Australia.
Mm-hmm. As a nation, we become so fixated during the Olympics, essentially for a 2-week period, we become obsessed with these people who were relatively unknown before that. Yeah. What is it like to basically have 25 million people just sort of, you're in the spotlight and 25 million people are suddenly sitting at home watching you, and all of a sudden people are talking about you, and then in a flash it's back to how it was before.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was absolutely amazing. I got a lot of Instagram followers. That was pretty nice. I guess that was because I was in a Speedo the whole time.
That's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure there.
That's it. It's funny. I've done a couple of talks at schools and in front of CEOs and community groups and stuff like that. And I'm almost more nervous wearing the clothes than I was in a Speedo in front of, as you said, millions of people. I guess because I knew I was by myself on the board, and yes, people were watching me, but I knew what I was doing. Yeah. Whereas when you go and speak at schools and stuff like that, you're sort of right in other people's faces. But yeah, so I was always more comfortable wearing a Speedo than I was in a suit. But yeah, it's that experience. The people. And the news, the articles that were coming out, it was really cool, a great experience. Both during and then afterwards. Well, you just come back and you have your quite a bit of downtime, and it's you're on this high at the Olympics, and then suddenly you come home and you have a bit of withdrawal, so to speak, because you literally walk around and there's Serena Williams, or you sit down and Michael Phelps is having dinner, right there. And then you come home and you just everyday life where no one knows who you are, or that sort of thing, because you're not a footy player, or you're not
you're having a beer with David Bullock and you're like, well, this is a bit of a downgrade.
I know, tell me about it. Exactly. But and it's funny because my best world ranking was 8th in the world, and that's pretty good, I thought. But then you come home and you're like, oh well, you're just Joe Blow now.
Well, the next question I sort of had was around that sort of the post Olympic withdrawal, because I think we saw a lot of athletes who were at this Olympics talk about it because of the fact that it wasn't not a normal experience. They didn't get to have, say, family and friends in the crowd, and then they've come back from that sort of high, and then all of a sudden they're in a quarantine facility in Darwin, and then all of a sudden they're literally forced to face everything in sort of an elevated time. Talk about that from, say, your perspective as, being someone who's been through that and going through that experience. And also, how do you feel when you watch the Olympics now?
I've got a lot of respect for the people who missed out on the Tokyo 2020 and then had to wait another year, and then go and compete without a crowd, without their families, having to fly in, and then as soon as they're done competing, fly out, not even get to go to the opening ceremony or the closing ceremony. I feel very bad for them. I was lucky enough to go to both the opening and the closing ceremony in Rio, and it was the most extraordinary experience I've ever had. We had Anna Mears as our flag bearer, and you're walking out of the tunnel into the big Olympic arena, and all the Aussies are jammed, nice and close, no masks. We're all right in there, huddled up, walking out, and someone starts yelling, "Aussie, Aussie, Aussie." And we just erupt into this oi, oi, oi. And it's just like, and then we get announced and the flag comes, Anna's got the flag and everyone's just hyped and pumped and it's so, joyful, and you're on camera and you're filming everything, and, you're trying to get on camera so your family at home can see you. And these guys didn't get to experience that. It's heartbreaking for me. Because I really don't think that they got the full Olympic experience, and I'm sorry for those it'll only be their one, because injuries or life, and that'll be the only Olympics they went to. So for those that have been to others and then went to Tokyo again, or those that have gone to Tokyo and then will go to the next one, I hope it's different for them. I'm sure they would have still loved it and representing Australia, and I think broadcasting did a pretty good job this time with Tokyo. Because of that fact that there wasn't crowds there. Yes, a lot of the smaller events probably didn't get as much as people would like, but I think that the broadcasters did pretty well. It was amazing experience for me, and I hope that those who went to Tokyo can experience something like what I did.
Yeah, 100%. No, I guess they didn't really need a crowd for the swimming, at least, because they just put the camera on Ariane Titmus's coach, who was just absolutely losing his mind, grabbing handrails and doing all sorts of things to it. But where my head was thinking during the games is there would be certain athletes who qualified for it a year ago that haven't been able to qualify it for this year, and that's it. And my heart sort of sank thinking about that. I took 2 weeks annual leave for the Olympics, so I was going through all the emotions during it and just thinking about everything and watching every sport. But there would be a small selection of athletes who unfortunately will not go to the Olympics because of that. And my heart sort of breaks there. But I want to just jump back. I want to dive back actually to something that you sort of spoke about, how you felt comfortable, say, on the diving board, in front of, tens of thousands of people and millions watching at home, as opposed to speaking to CEOs. Get to the edge of the board, you think about all the hours, weeks, months, years of training, the surgeries, everything you've gone through. And it all literally comes down to the next 5 seconds. Like, how do you calm yourself down and stay within yourself in a moment like that?
Yeah, well, the worst part about it is sometimes you're standing on the board and you're just thinking, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up. No, but I guess the biggest thing is, because of the experience that I've had and the coaches and stuff, you sort of learn to deal with those pressures, or they try and put you in pressure situations as often as possible to make you try and calm yourself when you have thousands of people watching you and you're wearing a Speedo doing a sport where you might hit your head. So it's more just about the practice and trusting yourself and trusting your coach. And just like, I'd get on the end of the board, I'd set the fulcrum, which is the wheelie thing, to where I'd want it. At that time, my name would be being announced and the dive that I was doing. I'd look at the referee and nod to them that I was ready. Then they'd blow the whistle, and I'd walk to the end of the board thinking about the few little key points that my coach and I had gone through. So for me, it would be like squeeze my toes, arms up, chin up, look for the water. As small a cues as possible, which meant a flow-on effect of doing a dive. And that's basically how all of my different dives went. For each dive, I had a different cue, whether it was with the hurdle or, if I was twisting, you would think of certain different keys. So, for instance, one of my dives was a reverse 1.5 somersaults with 3.5 twists. So reverse is where the water's over here, you're going forwards, but you're rotating backwards. So your head's going back towards the board. So I'd know that, when I take up, I've got to look for the board, and then I know I've done half a twist, and then I've got to just wrap and hold for three more twists. And then I knew when I checked out, I could see the water, and then I'd be able to pike and line it up. So that just comes with hours and hours and hours and thousands of dives, basically. And practice, and yeah, you wipe out all the time, or sometimes you make some pretty good splats, or get some good bruises, or on the odd occasion you might hit the board with your toes or your feet, your fingers or something like that. But that's more of a being tired or not thinking properly. We always dove in a safe environment. We did plenty of training. It was just more of an error of judgment sometimes, just part of sport. So
were you very routine based in terms of, so like you had, say, 5 things that you could control from that time where, say, the diver before you's gone, and then it's your time to go up, to sort of just train your mind to know that, yep, I'm comfortable. I know what I'm doing. This is sweet.
Yeah. So at the Olympics, we had 76 competitors, and you all have to do 6 dives, and they average time, because of commercial breaks and because of broadcasting, is just over a minute to dive. So that means the event is going to take 6 hours. So our prelims was, I think it ended up just under 6 hours. So we did our march on. Then I went and saw my coach. I was somewhere in the middle. I can't remember what number, but I was either in the middle or I was stone last, one of the two. Anyway, so I'd go and see my coach, and then I'd just go put my headphones on. I'd go sit down, and I actually read a book, and I would look for the person who was 10 divers in front of me.
Yeah.
And when I saw that they were going, I would put my book down. I'd get my skipping rope out. I'd warm up. Then I was still in my tracksuit. Then I'd get changed, put my togs back on, and then I'd walk over to see my coach. He'd give me the cues that we would normally talk about. By then it was about 4 or 5 divers to go. I would jump into the pool and then jump into the spa, like you see or the hot tub, like you see on the TV. And then I'd look at my coach again, and he'd sort of just give me a thumbs up or give me a nod, or, I'd always look for that from him. And then basically I'd use my chamois, I'd dry myself down. Then the diver before you go stand up just out of sight, but on the same level. And then as soon as he hits the water, I'd go jump onto the board, set my fulcrum, and then I guess look for the referee. Yeah. And then you're up on the board, you're thinking about your dive, spin your chamois up tight and not throw it down. And then, execute your dive.
You're not thinking about the last page of the book that you've read, and just how desperate you are to get back to it?
I don't even remember. I couldn't even tell you what the page, what was on the page that I was reading. And then so I'd get out, I'd do my dive, I'd get out of the water, jump in the shower, jump in the hot tub, go see my coach. He'd tell me, think about your next dive. You did this, this, and this. And then I'd go back to where all my stuff was, get completely undressed, put my tracksuit back on, put my headphones back on, sit down and read my book.
Do you know what the book was?
So,
this would be a great plug for the book.
Yeah, I know it would be a great plug. I can't remember. It would have been some sort of war book. I really like true army, like war books. It was something like that. And so I would literally, we learned how to switch on and switch off, basically, because my dive took less than a second from when you leave the board to hit the water, and then you've got to go switch off for an hour, and conserve energy and eat and that sort of thing. Whereas, you got your marathon runners who are going to be running that whole time, and I'm just doing 6 jumps off a board. I've got to climb to 3 meters, jump off, and do that 6 times, and
it's honestly one of the most fascinating things about when you speak to athletes from different sports, because I mean, my only real sporting experiences are, playing cricket or playing ice hockey. And, playing ice hockey, you're engaged for, like 20 minutes, for about 3 hours all up. But, and then if you talk about a marathon runner, the marathon runner is battling, God knows, I know what I battle when I run, and I'm running like 2 laps, but they're battling for 50 kilometers. But for you, and for, say, someone like a college football punter, they need to, or an American football punter, you need to disengage and you need to engage at the right times. And it's such an art in itself, because it is, at the end of the day, it's the difference between, success and failure. Because if you're sitting there for, 6 hours thinking, fuck, I'm at the Olympics. I'm so
Yeah.
nervous. And you're 75 divers away from going out and you're tapping your foot and you're pacing up and down. You're pretty much, you're done and dusted.
Yeah, and then you've also got, I mean, they also have the scoreboard up there. So, you don't want to like look at the scoreboard to see where you're sitting, or, some people do like to look at it, others don't. We had the Olympic champion from London, who was one of the favorites in in Rio again, and he failed to dive and ended up missing out on the semis. He didn't even get through to the semis.
Wow.
So it's such a cutthroat sport where you wipe out once, you're out of the game. Whereas say, potentially in running, you might fall over and then get up and keep going, and your cadence might be out, all that sort of thing, but you're not out of the event.
It's like Mac Horton. Mac Horton was the Olympic champion for, I think it was 800 or 400, and didn't even qualify for this Olympics. So it's like, it is just, it's mind boggling, especially for me, when you think about the difference between the say 4 to 5 years of training for preparation for essentially something that, it's not a marathon, or it's not something that's like a long distance bike ride, and say where you've literally got, all right, cool. You got 6 jumps and the jump takes you 2 seconds. So don't mess it up. And if you do, bad luck. If you got a gold medal, you're not making it through.
No, exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Speaking of medals, you're a 3-time Commonwealth Games medalist.
Yes.
You won silver in the synchronized 3-meter springboard, bronze in the 1-meter springboard at the 2014 Glasgow Games.
Yeah.
And you also won a bronze in the 3-meter springboard in the 2010 Games in Delhi.
Yeah.
How special is that as an achievement, and sort of when you can sit back now on it and reflect, say, after your career, to, you're one of the handful of people who essentially have, multiple Commonwealth Game medals?
Thanks, Chris. It's amazing. For instance, the Delhi Games, the bronze I got there, I wasn't even an outside chance. I was probably the biggest underdog out of the Aussies, the Canadians, and the British. And I just hit it on the day. I had an amazing event. Everything worked, and I missed out on a silver medal, I think by 0.1. Like it was that close. And I actually, that was the first time I realized that I was actually pretty good at the sport. Wow. Yeah, I know I was at the Commonwealth Games and that sort of thing, but for me, it just felt like another event. But when I won that medal, and then the recognition I got for it, it was it was amazing. It was to come home with a medal from the Commonwealth Games, and it was awesome. And then in Glasgow to do synchro with Matthew Mitchum, and come home with a silver medal. For me, Glasgow was quite a whirlwind. On the first day or the second day, so Matt and I won the silver medal, and then the next day I had the 3-meter, which I was favorite for, and I failed to dive. And it's a very good, if you guys want to look up a good one on YouTube, type in Grant Mel Commonwealth Games fail, and you'll see a good one of me on 3-meter. So I went from this high of winning a silver medal with one of my best buddies, Matt Mitchum, and then missing out on the biggest, which potentially would have been a medal for me as well, in the 3-meter. And then the next day winning a medal in the 1-meter, which I wasn't even, it's not even, it was like Delhi. It was like I was an outside chance. And I put in a dive that no one had ever done on the 1-meter, and I executed it well and ended up winning a bronze medal and standing on the podium with Matt, who came second. So, yeah. And then again, the recognition and the support from Australia and the Commonwealth Games Committee, and my family and friends, and just being blessed to represent Australia. It was such a cool experience. I hold it really close to my heart, I must say. It was just a hell of a lot of fun. And again, had my family there to share it with and experience it. So yeah.
Do you think that the success that you did have at those games sort of helped you keep your head down towards that Olympic goal when you had some setbacks there, but then you achieved results here, which obviously showed that, hey, you're good enough to do this on the Olympic stage and to, potentially be a contender.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chris, without a doubt. I mean, we'd had the World Championships just before Commonwealth Games, and I'd come 8th at that Worlds, and for me that was, I'd never done that before, and going into Com Games I was super excited, and then we're only 2 years away from Rio, and I just knew that I had to knuckle down and work hard, and I ended up moving to Adelaide to train with a coach there who was from Canada, who was actually originally trained my idol in diving, who was Alex Departie. And worked. I basically stopped all of my part-time work, moved as close to the training facility as possible, and just literally dedicated the next 3 years to making that Olympic team. And it paid off. I was lucky enough to have a bit of support from my family and the Aussie government. The dream came true, and we got to go to Rio. So.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely amazing stuff. I know you sort of said that when you got that first bronze, that was the first time you realized that, holy shit, I'm actually good at this. But is there a moment that sort of stands out for you that sort of springboarded your career in the right direction? I told you I had more puns.
Yeah, that was I like that one.
Yeah.
Before I moved over to the States, so I moved over in December 2008, and I was tossing up either to move to the AIS or to move to college. And at the time, personally, I don't think I would have enjoyed living at the AIS, and I probably would have hated diving and potentially quit before I'd made that decision. Before I'd made the Olympics. And going to college was the best part of diving, because I did it for the team, the swimming and diving team at A&M. Excuse me, there was people who were just walk-ons on the team who might not have been the best divers or never went to the NCAAs while we were there, but they worked harder than us. They were just there because they loved the sport so much. They loved the team. They loved representing their university, and it brought love to the sport for me, and really realized how much passion there is in people that just love the sport because they love the sport, not to make the best team or anything like that. And that was probably the turning point for me. Was I would have either probably quit diving if I hadn't have gone to the States, or I would have gone to the States. And coming back from that, yes, I missed out on the Olympics as I spoke about, but having that network over there as well as my family here really brought home to me that, I'm good at this sport. I can go places, and I'm getting a free education out of it. I'm representing the greatest college football team and university in college. And at the same time, I was able to go home every year and compete for Australia. So I had the best of both worlds. A&M looked after me a hell of a lot, but also gave me the freedom to pursue my passion in making the Olympics and Commonwealth Games and representing Australia at the same time. So yeah, that was, I would say, to answer your question in a short, that was probably, it was going to college.
Yeah. Was that the most enjoyable time you'd say you'd had with diving?
I would say from then it was the most enjoyable time. I just finished high school. I was doing a degree here in Melbourne at ACU, and I was not having fun. It was just not, I don't know why I wasn't having fun, but I just didn't like what I was doing. And from moving over to the States, I was there for 5 weeks, and I called my dad and I said I wanted to come home because I was homesick. And he said, if you just stick it out for the first semester, you can come home at the end of the semester if you want to. You don't have to be there. You can just come home. And I ended up staying for a year before I came home. I didn't even come home over summer holidays because I just loved it so much, and that was the support. What I was talking about was, I know it's tough, mate, but just work it through a little bit more, get through what you got to do. And if you want to come home, come home. And it just made me actually love it. I fell in love with how things work over there, the people, and the sport of diving again. And yeah, it was just amazing. So yeah, A&M was really a big part of that.
Yeah, it's so funny how when you talk to athletes, say like yourself, who have gone to world championships or Olympics or they've played professionally, and they always talk about how the most enjoyable time was, say, at college or high school or when they were younger, and when it was not carefree because you're obviously still competing in that, but it's just the sort of team environment, and it's just that when you're literally just in love with the game and there's no financial pressures and stuff like that. And it's always fascinating to me that how people like yourself who have won medals at Commonwealth Games and been to the Olympics, but you still go back and say like, oh shit, like how much fun was that time at college though?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I was lucky enough to get a few championship rings and stuff in college, and they really know how to make a nice championship ring for you if you want. Oh, they're pretty sick. And the NCAAs that I went to, and all the different awards I won, and that sort of thing. It was just, they do it really well, and you get rewarded for what you do, and it's a team thing, and you want to work well for the team. So when I came back after being at college, I just knew that I was doing it for myself and for the younger kids that I trained with. When I moved to Adelaide, I was the eldest by a long way, but all these little kids were looking up to you and training and being at training and working hard. And I just knew that if I was good about what I was doing, and if I could show them how much I enjoyed the sport, then they would as well. And yeah, as I said before, it was just learning in college why I was doing the sport, and it was because of why I loved it, and it was for me. It wasn't for anyone else.
I mean, I know that we're sort of say 4 years away from your retirement and the end of your career, but have you sort of had the time to really sit down and process everything, say properly, and sort of look back on your career as a whole?
It's sort of a bit tough to sort of think about, but I mean, in terms of as a whole, I just realized that, no matter what sort of ups and downs I've had, whatever issues I've had in my life, I know that I've got the support around me to get through anything I need. But also, if there's something that I want to do and I want to put my mind to it, I can do it. For instance, it took me 5 goes to get into the Fireys now. And, after every one, I was just like, oh, I just really want to do it. I'm just going to keep going till I do it. And like on the 4th attempt that I did, I had one of my best mates. I was like, oh, I'm applying for this again. He's like, oh yeah, I might give that a go. And he got in first go, and I was like, in the back of my mind,
like, I'm really happy for you.
But yeah, I'm really happy for you. But shit. Anyway, but in saying that, he was a big part of helping me get in the second time. So it just made missing out on certain things throughout my life, and then being able to, deal with it and understand that you're going to go through a bit of pain to get over that, but then rebuild. That has been the biggest thing, even missing out on the interview in the Fireys, and then sort of, 6 months later, I had so much more life experience just in 6 months that I could use that for different interview questions or different life experiences, so it's all part of, I guess, the journey is failing, and then, learning from that and what you can do with that sort of thing. That's what I've taken away from my career.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely incredible takeaway. Grant, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. A lot of admiration for the way you attacked your career and sort of your attitude towards proving people wrong. And mate, all the best with the Fireys and sort of everything moving forward. That was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it, Chris, and thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, looking forward to catching up again soon, mate.